Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here and discussing this consequential interstate transport rule. According to the regulatory impact analysis, the final rule is anticipated to close more than 14,000 megawatts generated by coal-fired power plants. Now, let me state this clearly. The premature forced closure of coal-fired power plants in this nation is a danger to American energy security and grid reliability. This rule and other regulatory actions taken by the EPA cripple our ability to provide affordable, reliable, baseload energy to power our nation. For this reason alone, not to mention the 90,000 direct coal mining jobs in 26 states, including Arizona, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, just to name a few, this administration must reverse course. Now to my questions. Director Wells, in the proposed rule and in the final EPA rule, EPA included a provision called dynamic budgeting. This provision would have EPA adjusting each state's emission budget in the future years to ratchet down the amount of emissions that power generators could use to comply with the rule, eventually driving more and more sources to tighter and tighter emission limits or towards closure. EPA received comments that the dynamic budgeting made the proposed rule overly stringent, more so than what was needed to ensure downwind state compliance with the national ambient air quality standards, and that dynamic budgeting was effectively generation shifting. The Supreme Court, in the case of West Virginia v. EPA, invalidated the Clean Power Plan because of its reliance on generation shifting. So, how is generation shifting now okay in this cross-state air pollution rule? And how is the continued forcing of more and more stringent emission limits not over control?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I think you're exactly right. The problem is in the uncertainty. Not only in terms of the controls and the emission reductions that that a particular facility might have to deal with, but also the uncertainty in just how the initial emission reductions were set by the rule. And I think that's one of the main problems that we have with the rule, is that we've not had an opportunity to really evaluate whether or not a state like Mississippi is actually having an impact, and whether the facilities in our state are actually having an impact on air quality elsewhere, and to force the early retirement of equipment and facilities before the retirements of those facilities is planned for a reason. It's so that the grid can be, and we don't regulate, I'm getting a little bit out of my lane, which EPA is not afraid to do, but I'm not a energy regulator, right? But I know that the people that will have to bear the costs of the early retirement of those facilities are the folks that are some of the same folks that others are concerned about in terms of their health. We're concerned about everybody's health. And so the costs that we talk a lot about, there's a lot of costs that are involved here that have to be considered, not just the purported health costs of a contribution to air quality that is not even certain that Mississippi is causing.
So if you plan to retire baseload and then retire it earlier before a replacement source of baseload energy is identified to replace it, what happens?
Well, the grid becomes unreliable.
There you
Source
go.
of electricity becomes unreliable.
Thank you. One more question. Mr. Noe, as you shared in your testimony, while the EPA does the work to write the rules, It is the regulated community that does the work to actually reduce the emissions. How has the EPA changed the goalposts throughout this process, impacted the ability of the regulated community to make meaningful improvement to our air and environment?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As we said, our goal is sustainable regulation, and I love what Chairman Carper said. We need common sense to work here, so we need regulations that are achievable. And when we brought the EPA's attention to the fact that, look, in your proposed rule, you had 2 thresholds. Are you a significant emissions contributor, and do you have cost-effective reductions? And then are there proven technologies to get you there? We said, look, you're mistaken on all of those issues. And yet, the final rule has us in a situation where we'd, in theory, be required to put a technology on our facilities that has never been proven to us. And that's in direct contrast to what EPA said in their fact sheet, which is this rule relies on proven, cost-effective technologies. There are other industries where this technology is proven, so I just want to make that clear, but it is not for us. And so we just want to achieve what Chairman Carper said. Let's have common sense. We want rules that work. And, you know, we have many, many rules we comply with, and we work with EPA all the time on making sure that the rules they produce are achievable and are going to be successful.
Thank you.
That's key. Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. Thank you all, witnesses. Appreciate your being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We appreciate